Welcome to Common Sense Conversation. My name is Doug. I am the guest on the show today with Matt and Eric. I'm going to tell you a little bit about these guys. They're pretty funny. So if you haven't listened to or watched a Common Sense, if this is your first time off camera, they're a lot funnier than when they're on camera. So some of the funniest stories, here's one of the funniest stories that I've heard, is when Eric was building his chicken coop and he hit his thumb with the hammer. It's a funny story. So go back a couple episodes and watch that. How's the thumbnail?
It still looks like I've colored my thumbnail, right?
The evidence is there.
So, yeah.
Yep. And then we have Matt right here that has a hard time remembering what day of the week it is. We're glad that you made it today.
He's a busy man.
He is a busy man.
Yeah.
He's running a couple businesses.
Yeah.
And what's nice about these guys is from the moment I met them, I felt like I've known them my entire life. They're extremely personable, but on top of that, they're extremely knowledgeable in the finance industry with how to get your insurances in order, how to get your money in order, how to build wealth for you personally, and how to take care of your families. These guys have an in-depth knowledge of this. They've invited me to be on their show only because they discovered a long time ago I actually was exposed to some of the products that they offer people. So with all of that being said, I'm going to turn it over to the Common Sense Boys.
I have to say one thing about Doug that I found exciting, and we still need to do this. Whether it's just coming out to my house, Doug is a professional hypnotist.
That is true.
So you know, I was so intrigued by that. I'm really excited to one day have some kind of hypnotist show for our clients and
Absolutely.
and have Doug out. But
You can do that.
I thought that was so cool. And some of the stories he has to tell about that.
They're fun.
Amazing.
We're getting ready to start our high school season here next week. So it starts on Tuesday. I go to Marsh Valley at 10 p.m. Get over to 11.
So a series of presentations.
A series of presentations is
Okay.
how you do that. Yeah. So this is like high school kids. So what should I tell them? Because I get up and I'm like, and they have this really popular song. And so you get up there and you're like, yeah, get them all excited, right?
Yep.
And then you have to impart some words of wisdom to a high school graduate.
You're asking us what to tell them.
Well, yeah.
High school graduates need to know an awful lot more than they do.
They do.
Tell them to pay attention to the national debt.
So what we typically tell them when we're in this mode then is that you have your whole future ahead of you. It's going to go faster than you think. So be prepared. I mean, you spent this 4 years. This is your last night together as a group. So totally enjoy it. Really relax, really have a good time, make it memorable, be safe. But then, with life, find somebody like you guys that can help you and be your mentor and help you move through some of the challenges of life. It'll go a lot easier if you do that.
Yep. That's a good point. I think I remember a hypnotist coming. He didn't impart words of wisdom, at least none that I remember. But again, I was a high school student.
Yeah, in fact, guess what we found out? So we performed
listen.
right here in Blackfoot for 12, 13 years. The last show we had there with Blackfoot, and they decided they didn't want the hypnotists anymore after 12 years. We should have hypnotized
And you were
parents.
part of the show?
You know, but the class that was in the audience were in kindergarten when we started.
Oh, interesting.
That is interesting, isn't
Yeah.
it? Yeah, then we looked after the show, we were like, if we're just two old guys up here, we're probably going to stop. But it's so much fun, and we are two old guys, and we're going to keep doing it. So,
Good enough.
so anyway,
Knowing words of wisdom, I volunteered to go up on the stage because I'd never been hypnotized before. I was always curious about it. To this day, I still wonder if I was actually hypnotized or if I just chose to act like a goofball because it was high school and I wanted to entertain people. And since then, it's never happened again. I've never had the opportunity, taken the opportunity, or
you
asked
go
for
to the
it.
state fair and volunteer to go up on the stage.
No, I don't think I would do it at the state fair. I'm not quite that bold.
So here's one interesting thing. Only about 20% of the population will go up on stage and do a hypnosis stage show. Everybody is hypnotizable. Everybody is hypnotized on a daily basis. We go in and out of hypnosis 10 to 12 times a day.
I
And,
remember you mentioning that.
I know everybody's
It's-
like, no.
I think you mentioned that, like when you're driving down the
Yeah.
road,
Yeah.
and 20 minutes passes, and you're like, whoa, wait,
Yeah.
I've been driving. What,
Yeah, how did I get
How
here?
did I get here? It's kind of scary, right? I mean, what if I driven off the road? But
So that's your subconscious mind, right? Getting you from point A to point B safely because your conscious mind kind of decided to take a break.
Or
right?
thinking about different things, right? Possible or no?
Yeah, you think about different things. So a lot of people think it's sleep because we use the word deep sleep or sleep
Sure,
or whatever, but it's really not. It's a hyper state of awareness. You can hear everything that's going on. You can respond, obviously, because you've seen a stage show
Yeah,
and people
yeah.
are talking and moving around. The difference is that your conscious mind, where we become really conservative, we kind of hold back. I'm not going to say that because I might feel
Yep.
dumb or whatever.
Yep.
Well, when you're in hypnosis, all that goes away because your unconscious mind is more like a 2-year-old. It knows everything. It processes information a million times faster than your conscious mind. Keeping you alive right now, right? It's keeping your blood pressure going. And it's even telling you, hey, I need to pay attention because we're doing something serious and all that kind of stuff. So it knows all of this stuff, but it has zero reason. That's all in your conscious mind. Our reasoning of what we're wearing today, we got up and said, hey, I'm going to wear this today. This will be
What my
more-
wife did.
Yeah, your wife did. It's a good wife. Get us to our appointments on time, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And so that's what our conscious mind does, but our unconscious mind is more about keeping us alive, more about our surroundings that we're not paying attention to, like the temperature in the room, the lights that are on, and all this stuff. So if we start to use the unconscious mind, then it becomes more like a child. And there isn't the reasoning there or the things that hold us back. And so we're willing to go do things that we typically wouldn't do.
See, now I'm even more scared because,
Right.
I was conservative before, but knowing some of the things that my kids do, I have no way I'd revert back to that.
Well, it's a lot of fun. We should do it sometime.
Yeah. not
Yeah,
this-
I'd love
not
to
the
see
show.
this with that. We
You
should
seem more excited about it than I do.
I'm excited to watch it. I remember attending a hypnotist show like you when I was out of high school. This was a couple years out of high school. I've never laughed so hard in my life. It was the funniest thing I've ever seen. I mean, literally, I don't think I've ever laughed that hard in my life. And I would never get up there. But
So we have a funny experience, and then we'll get back to common sense conversations because these guys will talk about the things we never talk about, right? Religion. You guys will talk about religion because of the impact of what happens in our country, which is based on religion, on God and the principles. Money. You guys talk a lot about money, right? And you'll talk about politics. The 3 things we're not supposed to talk about. You guys talk about them. So you want to tune in. But one story before I let you guys do that. When we were here at the fair here in Blackfoot, and my brother and I decided that we would go just to watch the hypnotist. And so we sat way in the back and we were paying attention to what the hypnotist was doing. This is when we were really young in our career. We've been doing it 4 or 5 years. And he hypnotized the people. And this lady right in front of us, she goes out.
Oh.
But she doesn't get up and go up on the stage. But everything he says, she's doing right in front of us.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's unexpected.
Yeah, and so we're sitting there and we look at each other and I go, do you think we should mess with the hypnotist? And he's like, yeah. And so we tap her on the shoulder and she looks and we go, sleep. And she's, and so we gave her suggestions that she would get up and she would go up on the stage.
If you're the lady, please don't prosecute or say anything.
So she gets up and she goes up on the stage and she goes to the hypnotist. And he's like, yeah, right in the middle of his show. She is not on the chair. She comes up out of the audience and he goes, yeah. And she goes, just so you know, I'm not hypnotized. And he's like, okay. And he goes, okay. you're not part of the show. She goes, well, I just wanted you to know that I'm not hypnotized. And he's like, okay, you can go have a seat. So she comes back, she has a seat. And we go, sleep. We give her another set of instructions. She gets
While
up.
she's asleep?
Yeah, so
Oh,
so while
okay.
she's down in hypnosis, then we give her instructions. She goes back up on the stage. This guy's right in the middle of his show. Yes, no idea. The audience is just cracking up. Because
Are there people around you?
oh yeah, they're dying
Realize
laughing,
what's
so they know what's going on. They're dying laughing. and so she goes back up and she goes, "You think you could hypnotize me?" And he's like, "Lady, I'm doing a show." "Well, I'm just curious." And he goes, "I probably could, but not right now. I'm in the middle of the show." And she goes, "Okay." She turns and goes off the stage. She sits down, sleep. Give her another set of instructions. She goes back up on the stage. And she's, because we tell him you have to tap him on the shoulder and get his attention, you know. And so she's up on the stage and he goes, "What are you doing?" "I'm right in the middle of the show." She goes, "Well, I wanted to tell you that I was hypnotized back on my chair, and these two guys are telling me to come up and do this." He turns around and he looks, you know, and we're like, "Hey!" And so then she gets a chair, puts her on the stage, and then she becomes part of the show.
So she's sitting in the audience, and she doesn't volunteer to go up on stage.
No, but she becomes hypnotized, and that happens all the time.
She must have at least had a genuine interest and wanted to be, just maybe
Yeah, so
didn't want to go on the stage.
She didn't want to go on the
Inhibitions
stage, yeah. So once she was hypnotized, then we were able to drop in the suggestions.
Good heavens.
So I think that what I'm getting at
You
is
should have gone into politics.
right?
Yeah, we hijacked
Or
the show,
religion. Or money
yeah. Or
management.
money management. Sleep.
So this is interesting because the what you're talking about in terms of I totally lost the word, hypnotizing, right? Hypnotizing people.
Yep.
So in terms of hypnotizing people, you have to be open to suggestion, right?
Yeah.
So you told me one time that President Obama has a voice that they've done some research and
Yeah.
done some tests and things, and his voice is hypnotic.
Yeah, it was his speechwriters, actually. So within hypnosis, so when we talk about stage shows, that's a pretty deep hypnosis, right? Where you're going to do things, we're going to make you cluck like a chicken, we're going to have you do all this funny stuff. That's a pretty deep hypnosis. Most of the people up there are what we call a somnambulist. They're pretty suggestive. And you run into them all the time. Like kids are this way. A 2-year-old is a somnambulist. Like, go kick that guy. And the 2-year-old walks over, bam, kicks him.
Sure.
The guy's 6 foot tall, 225 pounds, and this little 2-year-old walks over and kicks him, and he's like, "Do that again," right? But no clue. And that's a somnambulist. They just will go do whatever suggested. But then there's what we call NLP, which is neuro-linguistic programming. So it's how we speak. So if I change the tone of my voice, I just slow down my speech pattern, it kind of draws you in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just, can you feel that? Just change the whole tone of what we were doing. So NLP is a big thing that politicians use. And so Obama had a speechwriter that knew how to write NLP into his speech. So if you would watch him, he would stop and he would pause a lot. And he would slow down his speech. He would speed it up to get the energy back, and he would draw you back in. He was a great orator. Mainly, that's how he got elected, is because he becomes believable. Even if he's telling you a bunch of garbage, you're still going to believe it because he's giving you time, and he's doing what we call a yes state. So if I go like, "Hey Matt, sun's shining, lights are on, feels good in here, and the sky is gray." You can verify 3 of the points, and they're true. But the last one, the sky is gray today. But if it's a blue sunny day, you may go, "Yeah, it's gray," and you'll agree with them.
Yep.
And so that's the yes the S state, that you can cause an NLP. Or I can piggyback ideas. And this is how suggestions get in. So I can piggyback an idea. So you tell me that I should invest in a whole life insurance policy. Because,
So not use the word invest.
okay, you should, never mind, I'm not the financial guy. These guys are. So you would tell me
I'm
I
not sure
should,
why we invited him.
I should be involved in this. Okay, that is what you want me to do.
Sure.
So now you just have other things that are plausible that goes along with it, and I will follow that. So plausible is,
We're a couple of nice guys.
you're a couple of nice guys. What else is plausible?
You want to save your money.
I want to save my money.
You should put your money in a whole life policy.
I should put my money in a whole life policy, and these are not the droids you're looking for.
I was waiting until we got to that point.
So that's all plausibility. So that's all NLP, which is a lighter state of hypnosis. So, and people, the movies use it a lot.
So I was just thinking, I was making this connection that in order to be hypnotized, you have to be suggestible. You have to be open to suggestion, right? You have to be willing
Yeah.
to be suggested to, right? I guess
Yeah.
is one way of saying that. So it's not just that he was hypnotizing, his speech was hypnotizing. It's that people were open to the things that he was
And he
saying.
was
Yeah.
saying the kinds of things people wanted to hear.
Exactly,
Most politicians,
exactly.
every
Right.
politician does.
Right.
Every speaker does.
So they do things with their body language. So I'm sitting and I turn to you, right? And I don't point, but I use my thumb. I'm going to make a point, but I don't point at you. I just use my thumb. So using my thumb indicates this is important. I want you to listen, and I'm tilting my body into you. And but if I go, Eric, this is important. I really want you to pay attention. I'm opening that up and bringing you in. And he was just phenomenal. He still is really good at it. He was coached, and he had writers that wrote that way. And then they PDR, practice, drill, and rehearse, over and over and over. So he'd deliver those lines perfect. Now,
Yep, that
President
was a
Trump
speaker.
was not so good at it.
I don't think
You
he
know,
listened to the
he was-
speechwriters
He wrote his own speeches, and you could tell.
in
you
the
know.
moment.
Yeah. He
So
would-
he was drawing in the people that were suggestible in terms of, he was talking common sense, and
Yeah.
they were like, that's what I believe in. So
Yeah, so
it's
when-
not so much the hypnosis side. It's
Exactly. So one of it is persuasion, and we can persuade people to do things that they typically wouldn't do if we use enough plausibility and yes sets and stuff like that. President Trump, on the other hand, created trust, right? So if you have a product and you want to have an influence with it, the very first thing you have to do is introduce yourself. That's why I did the introduction today, because this is our seventh or eighth podcast, and effectively we haven't introduced you to. So that people get to know you. The number one thing that people like to do is to know who we're talking to before they buy your product. And so that's why the introduction, and this is why we're having so much fun, is so they get to know you, that you guys are good guys. Because you can build the trust. You can build the fact that, oh, how long have you studied financial planning and manage your own wealth and build your own wealth? How many years? I've been studying for like 2 weeks. Because you gave me a book to read that I'm halfway through.
Sold you a book.
Oh yeah, you sold. No, I
thought that
I haven't paid for it yet.
You told me that you left him the money at the office one day.
I didn't. I had it with me, but I didn't leave it. I hypnotized it.
Yeah. Well, now I'm wondering, why did you say anything? You
I know.
had this.
I'm honest. I'm an honest guy.
No, I'd go look at my desk for it. I just believed that it was there because he said it was there.
He hypnotized you.
I
That's-
hypnotized. So how long have you been studying this, Matt?
2016, January 2016, I attended a seminar, and it's been study since then. I was kind of aware of it, vaguely aware of it, like a lot of people are, for some years before that. And it was always in the back of my mind because other products and looking at other opportunities and other strategies, and this kind of lingered in the back of my mind, so some light comparison. But yeah, 2016.
So 5 years you've been at it.
Well, January this year would have been 5 years.
Yeah.
Son of a gun.
So,
It's 2021.
So it's been 5 years. with history leading up to it.
Yeah, my mentor, my primary mentor, was one of the first people in the Intermountain West to start teaching this after learning from Nelson,
Yeah.
my father. And so he read a book probably in 2000. Yep.
And I think your dad's been teaching it for like 25 years, right?
Well, the book was written in 2000, if I remember correctly. And the first book he read was the first edition. Still had Nelson's phone number on the back of that book. And I think that was the year 2000.
2000,
Okay.
so 21 years.
21
so,
years.
so in Eric, how long have you been doing what you've been doing?
6 years, six and a half years.
6.5 years. And so you deal with, you have to help me with the words and stuff like that,
Yeah.
but it's basically to help with employee benefits and
Yeah, anything employee benefits. I had a call this morning, somebody needed, health insurance for their employees, those sort of things, yeah.
yeah. So you guys have been at this a long time, so you have a lot of knowledge, right?
Yeah.
But most importantly, you live these principles. Like we were talking before while we were waiting for Matt to get here, that you actually bought some products from Matt when you got to know him, and you've changed your structure of how you're looking at your financial future and how you're now building wealth versus just saving money.
Yeah, so.
A lot of people build wealth, but you're doing a better job of controlling what it is you're building.
Yeah, that's a better way of saying it, for sure. And this is the interesting part, is that I, like a lot of people today, I was invested in the idea of paying off my house, debt-free, becoming debt-free, and and then using the wealth, of course, to invest and things like that. I was so set on that idea. I was pretty hardcore. I was gonna put $1,000+ more a month into my house and get it paid off really quick. And then Matt had me read some books.
I sold him some books. Since he actually paid for them,
I did.
he decided
I
he
did
better
actually pay
read
for the
them.
books, and since then I paid for
Which, by the way, I do
a lot
have
more
money
books.
on me today.
Maybe
So-
after he pays for it, he'll decide, you know what, I paid, I better read it.
And yeah, so it was, it totally changed my perspective. And I think that's one of the reasons why we decided to do this podcast, is that there are a lot of people out there with perspectives like me that I had prior to reading the books and having these conversations. And it's helped me to set up and structure my finances in such a way that now am I not just going to be debt-free in so many years, but I'm going to be way better off.
Yeah.
Than if I hadn't followed this course. So.
Right. So now inside of this, if you're really paying attention, and what we're talking about is how you persuade people and how you really get them to use your products and your services, is you brought something up. How many people in America, Matt, can save $1,000 a month?
How many can?
Not how many will, but how many have the ability to save $1,000 a month?
Either discipline, the lack of discipline gets in the way, or frankly, sometimes folks are working as hard as they can and they still can't save $1,000, even though they're disciplined enough to save $200, and that might be a good chunk of the change for them. Other people could, if they wanted to, save $1,000 a month. So I don't know how many.
It depends, right? So part of the thing that you're talking about, though, and the book that I borrowed from you until I pay for it today, the guy had $388 he was paying a year into a insurance policy that works differently than the insurance today that 99% of the people know. And he basically turned that around and created his own banking system to finance his life. You don't have to have $1,000 a month. You can do it on less.
Oh yeah. For
So,
sure.
The first one that I owned was $250 a month, but at the time I also took $1,500 a year from various places, savings or from tax refunds, and so added an extra $1,500 a year to it. But $4,500 a year is not a huge sum of money, particularly for people who are working full time, right? Not impossible.
And with making adjustments in how they're spending their money,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So that's phase 2 of what we're talking about. First one is you guys are good guys. We've had a lot of fun laughing and getting to know you, and you guys are intelligent. You've spent many years studying this stuff and making sure you understood it. So the last part of this is now we understand product is what is it that I need to do, or what's the next step for this to really benefit me? So we can take the person that is looking from here to here. So we have this huge chasm that they have to cross. So two really good guys. You're funny. Like when he told about hitting his thumb, was that hilarious or what? I mean, it kind of makes me wonder if after the third time, if you
Now you just
The
want
thing is, how do you laugh as much as you want to laugh and still be sensitive to that person's feelings?
I know.
Right?
But by the time he hit it the third time, I realized it didn't matter if I was sensitive or not.
Yeah.
It was dang funny.
I don't know that you've ever really concerned that much about being sensitive.
I held back. I held back because I didn't want to hurt your feelings.
Oh,
That's 'cause
no,
I'm a nice guy.
I thought it was, I almost worried about telling the story though, because I thought maybe you guys would worry about my,
Yep.
my mental state of being or something.
You know, for a long time, Blackfoot's been known as the locale for Blackfoot South.
Which is a mental hospital.
And it doesn't hurt at all to take a vacation down there.
Yeah.
And maybe, from time to time, people need little vacations.
Once in a while.
I'm just going to say I learned my lesson. I learned from it. So
We'll see.
now
You've got 9 other digits. What's the next building project you've got? And when are you going to start it?
Oh, yeah, I've got about 20 of them.
But
Okay.
the good news is the chickens have moved into the Taj Mahal.
Yeah,
Good.
They're there.
One of these days he'll walk in with a hole in his finger and say, "So I was using a nail gun."
Finish the roof on the chicken coop.
Yeah.
So here's the question I have though. With the same amount of sensitivity that we gave Eric, would you guys, if somebody said, hey, I need to adjust how I think about my life, my finances, and my insurances, would you give them that type of attention?
More than. Attention, yes.
And would you help
We'd
them
be
out?
more sensitive.
And you'd be more sensitive.
Yep.
So now, really, the only thing they need to do in order to cross this chasm is get a hold of me.
Yeah, absolutely. Comment on the videos, email requests. We've got is a toll-free number? Is there a toll-free number we have up? I don't think so.
I don't think we have it up
So
yet.
we've got an email up, and then of course comments on the on the YouTube videos.
And what's your phone number? How do they get a hold of you?
Good heavens, which one?
Yeah. Which one do I want?
We've got the office line, but we're not always in the office. A lot of our days are spent out working with clients, visiting business owners in their businesses and whatnot. So we could always check messages here, but maybe we need to get a toll-free number tied to that or something.
Yeah, something where people can get a hold of you.
Yeah, the voicemail for the line that's here in the office, it just has my name on it right now anyway.
Do you have,
I guess we gotta
do you have an
think about
email that they can shoot an email into and then you can get a hold of them?
that. Yes, it is. Remind me. With the one we set up for the podcasts?
Is commonsenseconversations@gmail.
Yeah.
That's right.
I
Say that
have-
one more time, slowly.
So it's commonsenseconversations@gmail. Common
Now 5
sense,
times
sense
fast.
is CENTS.
CEN's like coins.
Yeah.
Yes, Common Sense
Yep.
Conversations. My cell number, so I give it out all the time. It's 208-412-1643. You can call me, and I'd be happy to get you in touch with Matt.
I get
Yeah.
enough calls on my cell phone already.
Yeah.
So I need to partition some of this and separate it. That's why I think maybe I could use the other phone line. Anyway,
So
next
now we
podcast
can.
we'll put that up.
How much time have we used? Oh,
See,
it went off. So we've
that
been
little
longer
clock-
than 20
Yeah.
minutes.
Oh,
yeah.
my heavens, yes.
By quite a bit, I think.
Excuse me for just a minute.
Okay.
I'm going to get the.
So while he does this
Clock
technical
back up.
stuff of keeping track of what we're doing, so people can reach you at commonsense@gmail.com. The reason why you have a
Common Sense
Gmail
Conversations.
account is for our YouTube channel, so they can
Yeah.
look us up on YouTube. Whoa. Well, we still have 10 minutes before we.
Yeah, we reached the normal amount of time.
So
Another email address that I check is info@ivsolutions.org.
Okay.
Right, so that's Integrity Business Solutions.
Okay.
So if they need something
Yeah.
a little bit more direct.
And our
But-
podcast is on Pandora. So if they want to look at Pandora, it's also on Apple iTunes. It's also on Stitcher. There's about 4 or 5 others that whatever one out of these they want to look it up, they can just go do a search and they can find it under Common Sense Conversations.
Perfect.
So it's been exciting. I don't think we talked about why I was supposed to be here.
No, you got way off track on hypnosis.
So maybe we actually run some numbers next week and have.
Yeah,
Doug
we
on
need to
again
hear
next
his
week.
story though, the whole reason we brought him in. But honestly, what you guys don't know is what you just saw for 30 minutes. We were talking already
Like
for
an
30
hour.
or 45 minutes or something before we hit record. And we do that all the time. And last week, the reason that we needed to have this, so let's get into it.
Okay.
So last week,
You've got 30 seconds.
I don't know how we got on the topic exactly, but I think that you'd read enough of one of those books that you said, now, let's clarify,
have 2
Doug has been here every time we've recorded a podcast. So
Right.
everything we've said has gone by his ears. I don't know how much of it was absorbed.
All of it, because then I take it and I rewatch it, and then I edit it and rewatch it.
I think he's
So-
he's doing a good job of that. So last week when you said, I think it was because you'd read enough in the book or something
Yeah.
triggered these memories of yours, even though he'd already heard and rewatched all of our podcasts, nothing happened then. So we didn't
all
say
did-
anything important.
In jail, I read the book
culminated.
and the guy says, whole life. And I was like,
He'd never heard the term before apparently in all the other podcasts, just a little disclaimer.
it went vroom right over the top of my head. So I heard whole life, and then I thought, hold on a second, I need to talk to these guys.
So we started no joke, we talked for like an hour and a half before we hit record, right?
Yeah.
And the whole time we're thinking, wait, we should just start recording now. And then we would just talk a little bit and say, no, we'll go ahead and start here in a few minutes. And then 20 minutes later, why didn't we hit record? We got to hit record. No, we're going to start the podcast in just a few minutes. And we did that 3 or 4 times. So finally, at the end, we decided, you know what, Doug's got to come back on to not necessarily replicate the conversations we had last week, but to bring those same things back up to the surface, the questions, the concerns, the thoughts, everything he shared with us. And I'm not going to get into it too much, but all these years in his past, he was taught some of the same things that I've been teaching and learning about for the past
Now, don't
5
call me
years.
stupid, because I didn't actually
No.
do them.
No. And you're not stupid, because here's the thing. Nelson wrote a book 20 years ago. My father remembers speaking to somebody. My father's older than I am, obviously. I can't tell you how much older, he'll get upset. But I'm his second child, and he's got 4 more after me.
So he's at least 20 years older than you.
At least. So when at his reception, when he was married, in his later 20s, he spoke to a relative of my mom's who says, hey, young man, I've got something to share with you. You know, the kind of thing that,
Yeah.
Anyway. And he heard a little bit about what we talk about so much in the power of whole life, dividend paying whole life insurance. And that was so many years ago. He kind of disregarded it, okay? So there's that instance. And then you walk in and you say, guys, all these years ago, I'm having these memories come back of these things that I was a little bit aware of.
Yeah, I was like 10 or 11 years old
Yeah.
when I heard about this stuff. So
And-
I was really digging back. I was like, man, this sounds familiar. Why does this sound familiar?
Yeah.
And my dad was involved in something similar to what you're doing.
And nobody that I'm aware of, until Nelson wrote that book, nobody tried to teach this to the common person en masse.
Right.
And so we've got these financial professionals all these years ago helping their clients understand it. And maybe there were some other professionals they worked with who also understood it, but nobody was doing seminars. Nobody was really mass producing and putting this information out there. And interesting point about Nelson, he didn't release the rights to that book that he wrote the whole time that he was alive, because he knew that in order for someone to really understand it and get it and actually implement the concept, they needed to have a coach. So he was insistent that he retained the rights. That's why you don't find the book brand new out on bookstores or online or anything like that. You've almost got to go to the source still today to get that book, because he wants people to know where to go to get some follow-up information and get some coaching to go along with it. Now, a whole lot of books since then been written about the concept. I like to call them IBC Light, Infinite Banking Light, Becoming Your Own Banker Light. Nelson's book is the full meal deal. You start out with soup and salad, you get into the steak and potatoes, and you get some dessert in a 5-part book.
And what people need to know about what you're talking about is you're going to listen to these podcasts, but you need in-depth information. You need the mentor. You need the person that can guide you through this. You need Matt. You need Eric. You need to work with them in order to really understand the details.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no way that I would have gotten anywhere close to where I understood all the content. And the book does a great job, and they obviously, you know, as encouraged to read the book, and so I read the book, and that's what sold me on the idea. But to really understand how to apply the concepts in different ways, and really come to understand the principles that were taught in the book in a light that applied to me personally. It was the mentoring that did that.
And Nelson, the wonderful thing about that book is it's literally the words he used in his seminars as he taught thousands and thousands of people over maybe 20 years. And so literally nobody has taught this concept to as many people as Nelson did while he was alive. And when you attend the seminar and have the book there with you, so much of it is word for word. And he says right in the beginning of the book, this is the text for a 10-hour seminar that I put on. And everybody since then, I think, tries to take the concept and make it more applicable for farmers, or specifically for business owners, or specifically for...
Which is exactly what my dad did, is he made, before all this, he made it specifically to farmers. I mean, he did. If you didn't own 1,000 acres, he didn't talk to you. Okay. I mean, I don't know what size of farms, but basically you had to be a farmer, and you had to have a reason that you were going to take this sum of money and turn it into your own banking system. And, you know, we lived in Washington State, and the whole state was full of farmers, and so he did very well.
And part of the reason, I think, at least today for me, part of the reason I work with farmers, partly because they've got their hands literally in their business. It's their sweat, blood, and tears, right? And so they have a very personal connection with their business and their land. And oftentimes, that land, the business based on that land, is passed down from generation to generation. And this automatically becomes a generational solution and ties generations together. In fact, another gentleman has a little booklet put out talking about the Family Money Farm, I think. I'll clarify the title. And so all these years, and that book was just written 2 or so years ago, and so there are people who are taking something that your dad taught how long ago?
Back in the 70s, late 60s, early 70s.
So taught clear back then, and now people are bringing this up to the surface because it was kind of buried, unfortunately, and kind of lost in the big financial picture of advice that we see in the world.
But when it comes to financial stuff, let's be really clear. Who says that? Sorry. Is that most of the time, financial institutions are interested in what?
Their profits.
Their profits, right?
They'll control our money for us.
So there you go. So if they're going to make less money, it's something that will, even though it benefits everybody else, what product are they going to push? We don't have to. I don't want to get you in trouble or anything. But if you're listening, listen closely. Is that
who controls the money that you think is yours?
Yeah. And this frees you from that. That's what you're talking about. Is separating yourself from there. Take off those, financial handcuffs, those golden handcuffs, and throw them away, and come and talk to you. Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Please.
I just want to make sure that's what we're talking about.
Yeah. And you had so last week he starts talking and shares parts of this experience, his story, his history, and I'm walking around, I'm pacing, and I'm thinking, I can't believe he came this close to understanding it.
Well, for an 11-year-old, I did really good.
Yeah, but it wasn't. Share your whole story with us, because it wasn't just then. It was you had a policy.
Yeah. So
go ahead.
When I was 10 or 11, my dad's setting up this be your own banker with farmers. Although he didn't call it that because it didn't exist.
Sure.
But basically doing the same
Sure.
thing. So
Nelson acknowledges he didn't create anything.
yeah, he just
Found
refined
it,
yeah.
refined it, and taught it to
Yeah.
the masses.
So hanging around
By the
with
way,
my
what insurance company did your dad work for?
Prudential.
Okay.
Yep. So he worked for Prudential. He loved to golf. At least I thought he loved to golf, but he was meeting clients on the golf course, and I was the kid packing the golf clubs. And so I would be listening, while they were talking and stuff.
Sure.
And that's where I kind of picked up on some of the words. By the time I was 16, my dad's no longer in my life, and I am now working and doing all kinds of stuff. By the time I'm 20, 21, I'm married and, working for myself, have a kid, and I have a friend. He says, "Hey, you need a life insurance policy." And
Good
I was
advice.
like, "Why? I'm 25. I feel great. I'm healthy. I don't need a life insurance policy," right? And he goes, "No, you really need a life insurance policy." His name's Randy. We're good friends to this day.
Oh, good.
And he says, I want to sit down and talk with you. I work with a company called,
Hey, Randy, come talk to us.
come talk to him.
We could use your experience.
Yep. And he worked for a company called Northwestern Mutual. And so he sat down with us, with my wife and I, and talked to us about insurance. Because I was the caddy on the golf course and listened, I said, I'll take the whole life policy, which I did for $30 a month or whatever, which was a big deal at the time. And so we wrote it up, and I had that policy for 15 years, 20 years, a long time, until a tragic event. And my wife and I separated and went our own separate ways. And we cashed it out, and she took the cash, and I waved bye-bye to the cash.
Okay.
How much of the story do you want me to go? Now everybody's going like, who is this guy?
Normal guy. Half the people have been divorced. But to focus on the power of the policy and what the policy already had in its natural state with you not knowing anything about how to do
I mean,
it.
it was like 15 grand, 20 grand or something.
So 20 grand, and this was 15-ish years ago?
Yeah.
Okay. So he had access, he had a pool of money that he owned, he controlled, he had total access to, $15,000 just sitting there. And it took some time for the $15,000 to grow. So at some point, you had a pool of 5,000, right?
Yeah.
At some point, you had a pool of 10,000.
Yeah.
Do you think, in that time period, or how often do you think you bought something significant, a car, a vacation that was $5,000?
Yeah, my whole life. So in other words, so Randy, next time I see you, I'm going to smack you because you didn't tell me that I could pull this money out and use it, with lower interest rates or whatever. So I went to the bank because financial institutions are really good at what?
Inviting you in their front doors.
Yeah, so they can make money. And so they did on me, right? So I, like everybody else, I bought a car. I financed it at the bank. I bought a house. I financed it at the bank.
Sure.
I never believed in financing furniture, refrigerators, or anything like that.
So you paid cash for those things?
Yes, I paid cash.
Okay, so you believed in financing them, you just put 100% down.
Yeah, see, that's why you need a mentor, because I never thought that way until a month ago. I'm listening to these guys going like, what? What are they talking about? Hold on a second here. Slow the train down.
So we learn about opportunity cost in school. This is
Do
just,
we in school?
well, in college, I guess. I learned about it in college.
Yeah.
Not,
Where the heck was I? I was studying
I'm not,
psychology.
I'm not sure if they talk about it in
I
high
had
school
one
at all.
class
They
that
don't
had
in
anything
high
to do with
school.
numbers,
I
called
took
statistics.
psychology, doesn't it? I took psychology. They don't talk, I took accounting. They did talk about opportunity costs. But I jumped out of my accounting class.
I think a lot of people know about opportunity cost now. I mean, it seems to be one of those words that people throw around a lot more
I
than
think they
used
know.
to.
What, I think they've heard the word opportunity. They've heard the word cost. Some of them have heard
And they
the
know
two
that
of the words
opportunity is
put
going to
together.
cost them something. Yeah.
Sometimes, yeah. Hey, I've got an opportunity for you, right? They hear that kind of stuff, sure. And some people hear opportunity cost put together, and they think that it involves. I believe anyway that most people think that it involves leaving your money here or putting your money over here, leaving it here where it's going to grow at one rate, or putting it over here where it might grow at another rate. And so you're losing out on this potential by leaving your money here.
We have a phone buzzing, Eric.
I don't
Did you
think-
remember the
My
beginning?
wife, sorry, I got, no.
Send her a text, answer the call if you need to. Wives are important, and any spouse is important. Not just wives. If you
I'm
happen
glad
to
you
have a
clarified
husband, that's
that.
important as well.
We're keeping him on track today. So what is opportunity cost to you?
So opportunity cost is simply taking one opportunity and the value that that opportunity represents, not just the value now, but the time value of, we talk about time value of money and the value that it represents. Matt has at one point shared to me the opportunity cost associated with my wedding ring, right? And
We were already friends at this point. Amanda, don't get upset at me if you're watching.
Did you feel the pressure?
So we talked about
Little
we
bit.
talked about how wedding rings, at the time you buy it is, in my case, we'll just say $2,000, right? $2,000 on a wedding ring, and years from now, that $2,000 had I invested it correctly could have been, we'll say $50,000 or whatever, right? You might have been able to grow it over
Which is
10, 20 years.
So let's clarify this. Your wife's name is Amanda,
Yes, she
which
is.
that 50,000 is a lot less than what he actually got in return. for
Absolutely.
buying that wedding ring.
See,
for
and
you.
that's what opportunity cost is.
That's why we
that-
buy wedding rings.
That the value of that $2,000 20 years from now means, my marriage to my wife obviously means way more to me than the opportunity cost of the $50,000, right? So that's kind of a out there,
We could probably
scenario.
end right there and you'll get a kiss. If you keep going, you may
I know,
not.
I'm gonna dig my hole here. But, so that's the idea, is that you have, over time, what is the value? So I talked earlier about how I have always, or not necessarily always, but for the past, we'll say even five years, been a real proponent of getting debt-free. I want to be debt-free, 100%, I wanted to be debt-free. And, paying off my house as quickly as possible and all these things. And then learning these principles, I already knew about opportunity cost, and then learning about how, okay, maybe becoming debt-free isn't the number one priority if in the future, the real value that I'm trying to get out of it is not just being debt-free, but being financially better off, right? Financially strong, having the, knowing what I know about the future in terms of religion. So we talked about religion a number of times in this, but knowing what I know in terms of what the scriptures talk about, religiously, what's coming down the line, right?
What we believe is going to happen.
What we believe, yeah, exactly. So, the second coming, a lot of people know different things, or look at it different ways, but we know about what's going to happen. My desire, the value that I want to get out of my situation in life is I want to have money that I can reach at any point, right? I don't want to have money tied up in a dead equity investment such as a house. And I learned about how a house is dead equity. I didn't really know that before. I didn't see the value or the lack of value that represented back when I thought debt-free was the ultimate value, right?
Yeah.
And so now I still don't go out and accumulate lots of debt. That's not the point of this program.
Right.
The point is, what type of life do you want to live 20 years from now or 10 years from now?
Right.
And
So if I understand what you're saying, then I have an opportunity here. I can pay off my house, or I can take those same dollars and create wealth. Eventually, I'll pay off my house anyway.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm not going to go build a whole bunch of debt, but I am going to pay off my house.
If you want.
But if I want, yeah. But in the meantime, I can follow your program or the program you teach and have more opportunity to manage my wealth, to manage my life, my financial.
See, and here's the
Is that what
interest.
did I do a good job
So
on
if
that?
I reduce the concept the way Nelson did to a single paragraph, he said that this is basically about recapturing the money that we pay in interest to banks and other financial institutions, keeping that for ourselves, lending that money out so that we earn the interest that the bank would have earned. So it's all about finding an alternate use for money, a better use for money.
Wow.
And as you were saying, a house oftentimes is an investment. Property oftentimes is an investment. The equity that is sitting in the house is dead equity.
Because
The
you're
property
not-
itself,
It's not increasing anywhere. It's
Correct.
right there.
correct.
So-
That equity, in fact, will lose value at the rate of inflation.
Oh, yeah.
right? Because it's
Especially if you
just
have
sitting there.
inflation and decreasing property values.
Yeah, the equity, people think too much about the money in their house or the equity in their house as being a critical part of the value of the property. But
Yes.
whether a person has their house halfway paid off or not paid off at all, because they just bought it or something, and those two homes are right next to each other on the same block and they're mirror images of each other, they will increase or decrease regardless of how much equity is in those pieces of property.
Very good point. So I'm going to stop you there because you've made a good thing, and that is that we need to come to you so we understand money better. And we need to come to you so we can get the insurances and the things we need to help support that. And since we're at 50 minutes, I am now winding this down for us.
You
So,
haven't
so
finished.
thanks for inviting me to the show, you guys.
Time out. You haven't finished your story.
Oh, I haven't, yeah. So where was I? You might have to have me back.
We'll have to have you back. Or you'll just have
Yeah,
to cut
I
out
think-
some of the fluff, bluff, and other stuff. That's your job. You cut
Okay.
out the
I'll cut it
unneeded
out.
stuff. Because the point of what you were getting at, you had at some point in your policy,
Yep.
you had access without knowing it to 2,000, 4,000, 8, 16, right? 20, up to 20, you said? 20,000, 15,000?
Yeah, it was about 15 to 20.
15, 20,000, okay. So the question is, how many significant purchases did you make? I'm not talking about groceries, I'm not talking about the power
so
bill, right?
Just cars over that. So I'm kind of a car buff. I know this, you probably shouldn't do this, but if I'm driving a nice car, I feel more successful. So I like to drive a nice car. So over my lifetime, and flipping cars was a fun thing for me. I used
Sure.
to flip cars and stuff like that. So when I was first married, I bought an old Catalina. I think it was a Buick Catalina. Remember those? It was a boat. I mean, it was as long as your office building.
Which is long.
Yep. And I bought it for $200. I polished it up, waxed it, made sure it ran real well, sold it for $600. Back in the day, that was a good deal. I bought a motorcycle for $300, sold it for $1,100. So I could have used some of this in the process of doing this, would have been a lot cheaper because I would go buy the car at the
Yep.
time. You know, my job, I was making $1,000 a month. I was going
Okay.
to college. And so I'd go to the bank. And this is where I learned that the bank was pretty serious about making sure they own the asset tied to their money. To my money that I put in there, they're lending out, but they want the asset. That's a whole nother topic. So I bought a 280Z Datsun. It's a fun car. And I bought it for like $800. Okay. Well, maybe it was a little more than that. It's about $1,000 because I had to go to the bank and borrow $1,000. So keep in mind, I'm young. I still haven't had my first career job. I'm still in college.
Did you already have your policy?
At this point, I didn't have my
Okay.
policy,
So
but
you did have to go to the bank or a rich uncle or something.
yeah. So I went to the bank and I bought this car and they gave me the loan and I went and picked up the car. The guy gave me the title. This is way cool. I signed the title. I now own the car because I turned the title to the state. They sent one back in my name. And so I had flipped a motorcycle, flipped this old Catalina, and now I had this 280Z and it was running good.
And this was the first time you needed a bank loan
This is
to
all, yeah,
purchase
because the
original.
others were like $200 or
Yep,
$300.
yep,
Now I'm
yep.
at $1,000.
Yep.
I'm hitting stride, man. This is like things are growing, and so I flipped the 280Z.
What did you do with the $1,100 from the motorcycle sale?
That is, I put that into the bank, and since my wife was pregnant, it kind of went into the house thing, and so I sold the car, and then I didn't make the payment because I'd never borrowed any money from the bank. Keep in mind, I had no clue what the banking system was all about.
Sure.
I barely had a checking account for the first time.
Sure.
And pretty soon I get a call, and they called and said, "Hey, we need to talk with you." And oh, by the way, I had to have a co-signer, so I learned out what a co-signer was, which
Okay.
was my stepdad.
Okay.
And very good guy, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And so I meet my stepdad down at the bank, and I'm like, hey, how are you guys doing? I'm all happy and stuff like that. And they said, well, we need the title to the car. I said, I don't have the title to the car. I sold it.
How much did you sell it for, by the way?
I sold it for $1,500.
Okay.
But I took that $1,500 instead of giving the $1,000 to the bank and having $500. I thought, man, I have $1,500. I flipped it into a little Chevy Love pickup.
Okay.
It was all brand new, painted and wheels, and I was going to flip that one for $2,500.
Sure.
Okay. So I like, well, I don't have the title. And they said, well, what did you do? I sold the car. And the banker, he's just like, no, we can't do that. So then I had a nice hour-long lesson on banks own the assets. They give me the money. I have to pay them back plus interest. That's how banks work.
Do you remember when you got the loan, do you remember thinking or talking to them at all about how frequently you had to make payments, how much the payments were?
Yeah, they kind of explained that, yeah. But, you know, just, you know.
You just thought, I've got a few months before I need to worry about this or something
I don't have to,
down the road. Okay.
Yeah, it'll be fine. And so anyway, what happened is my stepdad paid off the note. Then they refinanced the Chevy Love for the $1,000 or whatever it was. I cut them a check. They didn't have to do it this way. This was all about teaching me how this works. And so then they did that, and then a week or so later I went in and paid it off.
Yep. So you go through the steps.
I went through the steps.
Yep.
After that I realized, okay, this is how banking works. I don't really own it until I pay it off.
Correct.
And
So many of us go down and buy a car.
you
and
don't own the car.
Yeah.
The bank owns the car,
Yeah.
you're making the payments, and even after you buy it, you really don't own it, because now you have to pay your registration fees every year.
My dad always asks people if they know the real reason why the banks have drive-up windows.
So,
Anybody?
why is that?
Anybody? So they can see the cars they own on occasion.
That's
how it works.
That is really true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my whole point of that story is shortly after that, so now we're 2 or 3 years down the road, then I meet Randy, and he sells me this policy. And if I would have bought the policy first, let it build for 5 years, 10 years, I could have used it instead of the bank, and I would have been a lot further on. So,
Yeah.
but I didn't know that at the time.
Yeah, and so many people don't. I come across people on occasion who want me to review life insurance policies or want to learn more about the concept, and they tell me they already have one, and sometimes it's the right kind. Sometimes written by a company 20 years ago, and it's good enough for them to actually use. I know a couple down in Pocatello, live in Boise now, but when I first met them, each of them had a policy. They read the book that you're reading,
Yeah.
and they said, oh my gosh, I've had this policy for 20 years. They were 65 years old when I met them.
Yeah.
They've had 2 policies for 20 years, and they didn't realize. Now, one time they did take a loan out of the policy to finance something personal. It was a personal expense they had come up, something unexpected. But for those 20 years, it was that one loan. And they weren't sure if they wanted to pay that loan back or not. They didn't understand the consequences of doing so. And certainly in those 20 years, they financed a lot with their own capital.
Yeah. I mean, they probably bought a house. They probably bought a few cars.
Multiple cars. He had 2 motorcycles. He had a boat. Absolutely, multiple things. And so, anyway, the lesson here is that later on in your life, after you have the policy, you were still buying furniture. You were still buying refrigerators. And
Yep.
for some young couples, those are significant
yeah.
expenses, right? And a lot of those things today are being financed. It's
Right.
amazing to me how often car repairs, dental work is being financed these days. TVs and the furniture in our houses, right? So it doesn't have to be a $10,000 vehicle purchase. You don't have to wait until you have the $10,000. If we go back, if we ran the numbers and looked at a series of $500 purchases, and if that money had come out of a policy and then paid back into that policy, the opportunity cost, the lesson here is that the $5,500 would have acted as if it had been in the policy. And there's some details about why it all works that way, but a person can collateralize that money that you have. You could have taken $2,000 out, made a $2,000 purchase, paid yourself back over, let's say, a 2-year period of time, and the growth would have continued as if the money was there the whole time.
Yep.
And instead, we leave this sitting over here, and then we go and borrow $2,000. We pay some interest, and it might be nominal. I don't know, it might be $400 over some period of time, right? And people sometimes say to me, what's $400? Well, that depends on the situation you're at in life.
Yeah.
So if it's not two, then it's a $20,000 expense. If it's not a $20,000 expense, it's a $200,000 expense, or a series of $20,000 expenses that add up to $200,000 if a person has access to $200,000.
Yeah.
So
it gives you some flexibility.
absolutely.
So as we wrap this up.
You want to wrap it up now, don't you? So at this point in the story, last week, I'm pacing the room thinking, I can't believe this
That's
guy
right.
came this close and he's been watching all of these podcasts, and now he tells us, by the way, guys, my dad, and tells us this story.
We
and
almost
I
didn't
had
have a
policy,
podcast last
and-
week because back and forth. Well, how are we going to sit Matt down so we can do this?
Yeah.
For 15 years, there's a lot of money you could have recaptured, a lot of interest you could have earned, a lot of opportunity cost that you paid
Yeah.
because you financed things 100% down, which
Yeah.
is a lot better than borrowing, but okay.
There's a better way, right?
There's a better way.
Which is what this whole thing is
Yeah.
all about. There's a better way for you to manage your income, to manage your finances. There's a better way
Yeah.
for you to be where you're at and to get where you want to be. So like we talked about in the beginning, if you want to cross that crevasse, now that you know Eric and Matt better, and now you know more about the product they offer, and now you can sit down with them and you can take yourself across that safely so that you can do more things in a better way with your finances, with your money.
Yeah, and I took a fair amount of time getting into my policy, right? Researching it, trying to understand it, so on and so forth. I'm a big numbers guy. I like to do things by the numbers quite a bit, make sure that it makes sense to me. I think a lot of people are like that, right? And one thing that I learned is that, going back to my example, my story, where I'm taking now the money that I would have put into a house and I'm now putting it into these policies. I did the numbers, I did the research, and I found that I can still pay off the house in the same amount of time that it would have taken me to pay off the house. And I was looking at 10 years, a little less than 10 years. I can still do that with what I'm doing now, with the switch. It's not that I'm giving up being debt free.
Right.
It's that, 10 years from now, I can still use the policy to pay off the house, but now I have way more leverage. And in the future, paying off the house is going to be my only, would have been my only achievement, versus now it could be, paying off the house, or I can let it grow at a much, I can continue to be the banker and let it grow at a much better rate and continue to use it for investments at a much smarter type of investment strategy.
And over the next 10 years, you might buy 2 motorcycles and flip it into a pickup and flip that into a something else. And so there's opportunity that comes across, that's gonna come to you over the next 10 years.
Yeah.
If you had been overpaying on your mortgage, and if that money had been put into the house, it's not nearly as easy to go pull the money back out of the house.
Yeah, that's called refis. They want you to start over.
Yeah.
I wonder
Yeah.
why the bank wants you to start over.
Yeah, well,
That's a whole nother
Talk interest
conversation.
another time.
So anyway, right now, the common sense conversation you need to have is with Matt and Eric. You don't have to hit your thumb 3 times in a row to understand this. You don't have to forget that, we're doing this every Friday, right? You can actually sit down with them.
we had a couple of Saturdays in there, okay? It threw me off. I can't believe it's Friday already.
You can sit down with them and you can really, really take your finances and take control. And that's what this is all about. And yeah, they are going to talk about religion, they are going to talk about money, and they are going to talk about politics. The 3 conversations that most people don't want to have, but are the most important to have.
Yep.
So thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for all the recording you do and all the editing that you do.
So this was a common sense conversation with Eric and with Matt. Check us out. Find us on Pandora, on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever else. And we haven't finished setting up the YouTube channel. So we'll set up the YouTube channel and we'll make sure that they get there. So,
Thank you for joining us.
Yep.
thank you.